Welcome to the Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast, presented by Vox DFS Firelines. Now, here are your hosts, Justin.
Stephon Gilmore go to the Patriots. Now they let Mike Gillislee go to the Patriots. Are they now just the farm club within their own division?
Greg.
He's one of these faux leading women. It's like, that's not Angelina Jolie or Jennifer Aniston. It's some girl that I would see at the Circle K. That's kind of Alshon Jeffrey.
And Ryan.
There is absolutely no reason why O.J. Howard should be drafted before Cameron Brate. Welcome, everybody, back to another Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Ryan Skullroot, and we are so happy to have you with us tonight. The last preseason show we are on tonight, Wednesday. For those listening to this on iTunes, you'll be hearing this Thursday morning, us giving kind of our last takes before the one of the greatest times of the year, the beginning of football season. Unfortunately, it's the Patriots that get to go first. So, a couple things before we actually get started and get into the news and notes and get going with this episode. We wanted to thank those of you who entered into our contest for the Jay Ajayi and Martavis Bryant jerseys. We have not had a chance to actually get those names together yet. It's been a little hectic with me doing a career change and getting a whole bunch of stuff taken care of for that. So we will make that announcement soon on who got what jerseys and the Skull King t-shirt. So after that, we would still appreciate you guys going to iTunes to give us a rating and or review of our podcast. We'd love to know your thoughts on how we're doing and what you think of us. So if you, again, go to iTunes, look up the Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast, and leave us a review, and we would greatly appreciate that. All right, so tonight on the show, I've got Justin and Greg with me, and we are going to go over, again, news and notes, and then we are going to give our bold predictions for this season. It may be fantasy-related. It may be just NFL-related in general, a team that we think will do well or a team we think is going to stink. So that's kind of where we're going to be going with this tonight, kind of give our final thoughts on the preseason and get ready for fantasy football to officially go live with games Thursday night with the Patriots and the Chiefs. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and get this started. Due to Hurricane Irma, the Dolphins and Bucs will instead play their game instead of Week 1. Both teams basically lose their Week 11 bye, and they've moved the game to Week 11 instead. This is I think the best possible scenario to be able to do this. I think it's going to stink for those teams that are going to need a little bit of rest, but I think that this is the best possible outcome for them to do this. So for those of you who are having a little trouble because of this game, I lose Jay Ajayi this week in a game that I'm already the underdog in. Lose my number one running back, so I'll have to, obviously I've got to make some changes. I know that some people have, Mike Evans, Jameis Winston, so that it's okay to take a hit this first week. It's just Week 1. Everyone wants to start out with a bang, but for the reason that we're having, you can get over it. To be completely honest, you can get over a loss in Week 1.
And depending on how your waiver wires are set up, you might benefit from losing Week 1.
That's possible. All right. Ezekiel Elliott's 6-game suspension has been upheld. However, because the announcement of that came in late enough, the NFL is allowing him to play Week 1 against the Giants. On top of that, his representation has also filed an injunction against the NFL to basically get rid of the suspension, and it's going to federal court. We'll see how that goes. It very well could get reduced. It could get dropped. So For those of you who took the chance and drafted Ezekiel Elliott, no one to hold him, no one to fold him. Got to gamble. So,
well, you can't fold him.
Well,
but he will take up a roster spot for most of the season and produce nothing for you.
Well, that's if it's held up. So
I don't personally. I've read into it. I don't see this going away. I don't see it getting negated or limited with the NFL's hard stance against domestic violence. They're so careful to try and avoid another Ray Rice issue. I don't think there's any possibility that it gets reduced at all, personally.
Especially when he went and accused the league of a league-wide conspiracy. If you're going to go, and their entire argument is this is a league-wide conspiracy, that's not going to go over well. So I don't think there's any chance of that getting reduced, regardless of what this check said, and maybe there's some mitigating circumstances there, but I don't think that plays a role this season.
All right, Leonard Fournette is no longer listed on the Jaguars injury report and is ready for Week 1 against the Texans. Leonard Fournette was considered, some considered the best running back to come out of the class. Some said that it was Joe Mixon. What are you guys expecting out of Fournette this year from the Jags, considering they're not that great of a team, and they're going to have to kind of rely on him since Blake Bortles is their quarterback? Ugly faces are telling me major stories right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, he still has the potential to be, quite productive, because it's not like we haven't seen in the past where a bad team had a good running back and that running back ended up being very productive. Let's take my childhood of watching the Chicago Bears. They had Walter Payton and the rest of that team stunk. They make the current Bears look like the greatest team there ever was. So, and that guy led the league in rushing every year. Now, I'm not saying Leonard Fournette's Walter Payton, but given the position that he's in, he's going to get the carries. He doesn't play in the toughest division there is. He doesn't have that tough of a schedule. He's going to vulture anything around the goal line because you're not going to put it in Bortles' hands. So, I mean, I think you still look at Fournette being a rock solid number 2 to start the season. He could finish at number 1, but I think you can't go any lower than a rock solid 2.
All right. Justin, you're muted.
Primary problem with Leonard Fournette has nothing to do with Fournette. It has everything to do with the god-awful offensive line that no one seems to be talking about. And last year you had veterans who couldn't get squat done on the offensive line. You're talking about a team that couldn't run the ball, not because of scheme, but because of talent on the offensive line. Now, they're okay at pass blocking. They can buy Bortles some time for him to throw some interceptions. They can't run block to save themselves. And I don't see, yes, Fournette is a bruising type of running back, but he's not going to have the room or the space. He's going to get contacted too early from around the line of scrimmage, which will not give him the chance to find holes and get gaps to break larger runs. For him to be I have him more later 2, early 3, just because I don't believe in the offensive line. And I think, once again, the Jaguars are going to have to be in some shootouts, and they're going to have to throw the ball because their defense ain't that great either. So I think there's more things working against Leonard Fournette. Not his talent, but because of what's around him will prevent him from becoming a running back 1, maybe even a running back 2 this year.
Alrighty. Eric Ebron, hamstring, is no longer listed on the Lions injury report for Week 1 against the Cardinals. You could call Eric Ebron a post-hype sleeper because of how much he has been praised and vaunted as a possible sleeper every year for the last 2 or 3 years since he came into the league. This year he missed a lot of training camp with his hamstring injury. They lost Anquan Bolden. I mean, they don't have much in terms of big body for the red zone. I think Ebron's their best bet until Kenny Golladay is brought up to speed.
Kenny Golladay.
And they also have Michael Roberts, the tight end that they drafted this year, who's another monster of a body to be putting in the red zone. I'm back and forth on Eric Ebron. I don't know for sure if I can trust him, to be completely honest. So moving on, 49. Here's another sleeper that's just gotten injured. 49ers tight end George Kittle aggravated his hamstring and will be limited in practice. George Kittle, I believe, was out of Iowa. And when Vance McDonald got traded to Pittsburgh, everyone thought, okay, so now, Kittle really is, he's going to get all the work. He's already missed a bunch of practice time because of this hamstring. Now he's re-aggravated it. So I think that he's a guy to watch down the road, but for now, I think we leave him off. Tyler Eifert is practicing in full this week with his knee. Don't worry, he'll get injured by week 3.
Yeah, it'll be quick. It'll be quick and painful.
Yeah, exactly. Coach Pete Carroll said Eddie Lacy is ready for a full load if needed for week 1 against the Packers, now that Thomas Rawls is questionable for week 1 with a high ankle sprain. Let's be honest. We have made multiple jokes about Eddie Lacy being feast mode, just the amount of weight. Yeah, the egg roll, and just his weight issues. Could we see if Seahawks have actually put together? If we actually find out they've actually put together in a somewhat cohesive offensive line that could maybe even just finish middle of the pack ratings wise. If they could do that, I think that the running game will take off. And with playing in Green Bay, do we think that Eddie Lacy, if given a full load, can actually stick it to his old team?
I think there's motivation there. Once again, even us here in Seattle, I will always be questioning the offensive line until they go out and spend money on a starting lineman, not a Jaguars throwaway. But it's one of those things that if Lacy can stay healthy, people need to understand that he's going to have a full workload in week 1, because if Rawls already has an ankle issue, they're not going to force him the ball out of the gate. He's too important for the long haul of the season. So I see more of an Eddie Lacy focus, maybe a Carson or a Procise later on to kind of counterbalance some things later in the game. But I think Eddie Lacy is primed for a big game against the Packers defense that can be sketchy at times against the run.
I would start Lacy. I mean, I don't think that it's pretty rare that you don't start a player when they go back against their former team, right? You always usually want to take that shot. I think that the odds benefit you generally having at least an above average game in production. So I think this is a great litmus test for Eddie Lacy, because I'll tell you what, if he doesn't produce in this week, that's certainly not all that inspiring for the Seahawks going forward. Because if he's not going to get up for this game, what games do you get up for?
That's true.
You can't just have a buffet line, sitting at the outside the end zone trying to motivate the guy, for every single game with different foods and so forth out there for him to look at. He has to want this for himself, and if he doesn't show it this weekend, then I think that's a bad sign.
There's a lot of cheese for this game, so.
All right.
Platter.
Sticking with the Seahawks, Coach Pete Carroll said that CJ Procise is 100% healthy. I just don't think that he can stay healthy. If it gets whittled down, at least here's the deal. At least if their options with Rawls and Lacy get whittled down, they at least have Chris Carson who can take over as a bruiser back that doesn't have to be CJ Procise. Because he played great last year in that New England game, running between the tackles. But his biggest plays were the pass plays, were the sweeps outside and the shovel or in the passes out to the outlets. So that's where he plays best and is less likely to get injured. So I think if they can manage to keep everyone healthy, he will stay healthy. If he has to be pushed into a bigger role, well, we'll lose him after a game or two again. So And it's somewhat fantasy related if you play IDP. Poor Browns. The defensive end, Myles Garrett, injured his ankle during practice and was not able to finish. Let me see. They're awaiting an MRI, but early signs are that this is a multi-week injury. He's in doubt for the season opener and could miss over a month. Of course, the Browns would have to be facing this. I mean, let's be honest. It's the Browns. Does this surprise anyone?
No, I don't think it can surprise anyone. Just like when Lake Erie caught on fire, nobody was surprised by that one either. So yeah, this is just another. That's really sad for the Browns. I mean, I feel bad for them. There was a lot of excitement maybe going into this season with all the players they got in the draft, and here it is, your number one guy. It's the second time he's been injured during the preseason. And so this is another one of those things where you just look at it and it's just a kiss to death with that team in that town.
Well, I mean, he was having a phenomenal preseason as well. I mean, he was getting 1 to 2 sacks a game. He's going to be a very, very explosive player for years to come. But 2 injuries in the preseason is not a great homage or what was the word I'm looking for? It's not a great omen. That was the right O word I was looking for. The right omen for Cleveland to start this season. We already know it's going to be rough, but this is not helping.
No. Well, let's be honest. Okay. Quick timeout. Who's going to have the number 1 pick?
The Jets.
Okay, you think that so the Jets are going to be worse than the Browns this year?
The Jets are trying to suck already, and the season hasn't even started.
I don't know that the Jets even qualify as an NFL team. There's nobody on that team. There's nobody.
Not since they traded Sheldon Richardson or whatever to the Seahawks for Jermaine Kearse and what was it, a second or third round player?
Yeah, I mean the Jets look really bad. They have a decent shot at 0-16. I can't see him winning more than 2 games.
There is one player, and that's Bilal Powell.
That's it.
That's hysterical. We're gonna talk about the challenges of being Leonard Fournette, and then we're gonna reference Bilal Powell in the same conversation. Bilal Powell has never had a fraction of the talent of the other guy. I'd rather take the guy who at least got some talent in his body.
All right. Danny Woodhead is practicing in full this week. I actually somewhat got chastised by my work league because I didn't draft Danny Woodhead for the first time in 4 years. They couldn't believe it. I kept getting told, Danny Woodhead's still available. I know he's still available.
And everyone else was passing on it too.
He's still going to be available. I think he finally went in like the 10th round or something like that in our draft. Jeremy Hill with his ankle is practicing on Wednesday. How many weeks until Joe Mixon takes over as the starting running back in Cincinnati? Under week 6.
Under.
Define starter. The starter and primary running back?
Yes.
Or the one who gets the first snaps?
Primary running back.
Greg, you go first.
I'd say he has that locked up in under 4.
I'd take the over.
I'm with Justin, and only because it took them till Giovanni Bernard was out for 3 games 2 or 3 years ago from week, I want to say it was 8, 9, and 10 or 7, 8, and 9 for Jeremy Hill to finally get a start and run for 200 yards a game in 2 out of 3 games. So because Hugh Jackson doesn't like using rookies too much and putting too much on their plate to begin with, I can see I could see us having to wait. I think that Mixon will still be productive and still could provide running back 2 value, just like Jeremy Hill did when they brought him in to be a bit of a bruiser when Giovanni Bernard was still the starter and main running back. I still think that Mixon will produce, but I think Jeremy Hill is still going to get a lot of touches, unfortunately. Travis Kelce was removed from the Week 1 injury report. Will start against the Patriots. I think even if he was on the injury report, he still would have started against the Patriots. That's minor non-news. let's see, Giants head coach Ben McAdoo says the decision on OBJ is a medical decision. He still needs to be cleared to play officially. He did not practice today, it looks like, or yesterday.
He warmed up, but he did not participate in the official practice.
Yeah, it was the first time he has been seen doing any sort of running in more
outside of the facility.
Yeah, so I'm not holding my breath on him being ready for week 1, and even if he is ready for week 1, I'm not holding my breath on him being super productive week 1.
I have a bold prediction, which we'll get to later, about OBJ.
Okay. Coach John Harbaugh said Flacco will be ready to roll, quote, ready to roll, unquote, for week 1 against the Bengals. Not that it matters. So Tyrod Taylor will start week 1. He has cleared concussion protocol. And ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reports Pittsburgh and we already talked about that. Sorry. Seahawks wide receiver Paul Richardson is listed as a starter on the team's week 1 depth chart. I think he could possibly produce later on in the year, but to start off, I don't think he's fantasy relevant. So, all righty. I think really for the most part, I think that's about it that we need to cover for the news and notes. Why don't we go ahead and we'll get into some of our hot takes or bold predictions for the year. I hear the baby waking, so I need to go take care of that. If you guys could go ahead, guys, Justin and Greg will cover you guys for a little bit, and I will be back in a few minutes.
Okay, so I'll get this started with kind of a warm-up bold prediction, and feel free to comment on this, Greg. But one of my bold predictions is that LeGarrette Blount finishes outside the top 30 running backs for the season. The reason for this is we've touched on it previously in other episodes, is that LeGarrette Blount has not been fantasy relevant for any team outside of the New England Patriots, which I think speaks to the Belichick genius and his ability to get the most out of the players that he has. But one of the other glaring stats, and I'll say this one until I'm blue in the face, is that the New England Patriots ran LeGarrette Blount last year out of the I formation a ton, giving him a lead blocker, which took an additional defender away from Blount off the line of scrimmage. He ran 121 snaps from the I formation. The Eagles do not have a fullback on their roster. There will be no one to take that lead linebacker or that lead tackler away from Blount in the backfield, which spells problems for a guy who doesn't have the burst that he did when he was younger. So I see this as a serious problem. There was already talk of Blount maybe not even making the cut. What are your thoughts on Blount this year?
Well, I think there's no way that if he's in Philadelphia, he produces anywhere near what he did last year. I mean, last year he just, absolutely crushed it by, any measurement. What do you have, 18 rushing touchdowns? I mean, that's insane. He had over 1,000 yards, also something that he's not exactly known for. So I think there's no way that he's double-digit touchdowns. I mean, maybe 10 if all things went well. But the yardage numbers are going to drop significantly. So, I mean, I would agree with you on where he places. The question, though, is does he play the season on Philadelphia? Look at all the running backs that New England brought in this offseason. They did that because they don't really necessarily like any given one of them. They all have flaws or unproven or whatever the situation may be. And if the time comes where LeGarrette Blount is cast off of the Eagles, you know exactly where he's going to land. And at that point, his fantasy fortunes will change.
Yeah. What's one of your bold predictions for the year?
Well, I've been hitting some bold predictions so far with some of my bust predictions and so forth, like Melvin Gordon, and I don't know that this is a hugely bold prediction, but I am going to say that this year both Carson Palmer and Eli Manning finish higher in the fantasy standings. Production-wise than Russell Wilson. Now, I know that
Okay.
you guys never like getting that feedback, but I do believe that both of those guys are poised to have, excellent years this year. I think both better than they were last year because of either additions of personnel through signings like Brandon Marshall or people returning from injuries like John Brown. In Carson Palmer's case, in the event that, he actually plays. But I think both of those guys end up producing, better numbers, and their numbers were not terrible last year. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they end up, in the top 10 by the time the year's over, certainly top 12.
I agree that both Eli and Palmer will have good years. I still believe that Russell Wilson will have a good year. I think Eli can beat Russell because of the weapons he has around him and their inability to run. Historically, over the last 4 seasons, no team in the history of the NFL has done what the Giants have done in having a year rush average of less than 3 yards per carry. No one else has done that in the history of the NFL for 4 straight years. So historically bad running from the Giants over the last couple of years, and now Eli has much improved weapons in a second wide receiver, in Brandon Marshall, a very, very talented and young Evan Ingram coming out of the tight end / wide receiver position, which I think bodes well. Carson Palmer will have a good bounce back year as long as John Brown can stay healthy. I think that had to do more with Carson's issues last year, plus a little bit of being dinged up. But I think Palmer is the one that I'm a little less likely to be agreeing with you as better than what Wilson will do this year. I think Wilson can make up some things with his legs, which will also help him out. My next bold prediction is that Kareem Hunt finishes not only as a top 5 fantasy running back, but he will finish ahead of Christian McCaffrey in the Rookie of the Year voting on the offensive side. Right now, Christian McCaffrey is very dynamic. This is not a talent thing. This is more that right now, I don't believe in the reports of a dual running back sharing load with Charcandrick West out of Kansas City. I don't think it's going to happen. It may happen for the first game, but I think from what we've seen in the preseason, I think Hunt takes over that role and becomes the solo back. Jonathan Stewart is not going to disappear this year from Carolina. They're still going to be using him, not as much as in previous years, but McCaffrey will catch a lot of the backfield. He'll get some running plays. But I think because Hunt is more relied upon as a RB1 solo, I think Jonathan Williams eats too much into McCaffrey this year for McCaffrey to earn the Rookie of the Year. So that's why I'm going with Hunt, not only to finish as the Rookie of the Year, but as a top 5 running back, because Andy Reid's offense over the last 12 years has produced a running back 1 9 of those 12 years. I think this year is an additional year where that happens because of not only Hunt's ability to run the ball, but his ability to hang on to the ball. Once again, never lost a fumble in college, ever. In 4 years of starting, he fumbled the ball once but recovered it. He doesn't have fumbling issues, solid hands, solid running ability. That's why I'm going with Hunt this year.
Well, I mean, I think that's a solid, solid pick. I mean, I think definitely I agree with you as far as role in the offense. It seems statistically there's going to be more opportunities for Hunt. I think Reid's background speaks for itself. Top 5, I think it's possible. If all those things go right, it's possible that he cracks at maybe around the 5 spot. I think that could be a little rich, but I see it's completely logical that starting the season, you might expect him to finish, in the top 10. If I'm looking at some of the guys their names are in there right now, Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, Jay Ajayi, all guys I can see not finishing in the top 10. Yeah. Type of thing. Now, I think as far as what you're saying, as far as Rookie of the Year, you certainly have to like his chances. He's certainly not as sellable a candidate, I don't think. Part of that because of his market and just coverages that he's going to get. But, I think if you look at who's going to be the rookie of the year on offense, it's got to be one of these running backs. Somewhere, of all these backs that are being talked about, they're going to play significant roles. Those are going to be the guys who are going to ultimately win it.
Yeah, Dalvin Cook's another one that's going to get a lot of hype because Murray's not going to eat a lot into his carries.
No, absolutely not.
So, Ryan, give us one of yours.
One of mine. Well, I'll go with the one that got Greg to shake his head the most. How's that?
Which was that?
Amir Abdullah.
More than one.
Amir Abdullah will play at least 14 games and will finish as a high running back 2 on the season. We're talking about bold predictions.
That is bold.
That is bold. And again, this is more of a. It's not so much. I don't have stats to really back. But again, he is the only running back that they've had the last couple of years that, yes, he's been injured a lot, but in his time as the running back, he has produced better as a runner than any of the other running backs that they have had and tried to put into that position. Even when Theo Riddick is healthy, they still pass the ball to Amir Abdullah out of the backfield, and Theo Riddick only catches the ball out of the backfield. That's about all he does. So I believe they've also made a couple improvements to their offensive line, which hopefully can help protect Amir Abdullah. So I'm leaving a little room for him to still miss a couple games. But I think that he can finish 14. I think that he can play 14 games, and I think that offense is enough that he is dynamic enough to not only be able to catch the ball out of the backfield, and also to be able to run the ball to finish as because of his combined production, be able to finish as a mid to high running back too.
I agree that, Amir Abdullah is fighting for his football career. So he's got 2 issues. One, he had the injury issues, but the other problem is when he was healthy, he fumbled the ball all the time. So he's got 2 things he's fighting against.
Correct.
And so if either one of those, nasty creatures rears their ugly head this year, he's not going to be in the NFL anymore. He's going to be fighting for a practice squad spot next year at best. So he certainly has the motivation, I think, to try to stick in it. Whether or not the other things work, I don't know. Fumbling and just like failure in general goes with the city of Detroit, so that's not necessarily all Amir Abdullah's fault. But the injury thing, you can't really necessarily explain. So, it's definitely a bold prediction. I like your cojones on that one, Ryan.
Thank you. All right. Did you guys both do 1 or 2 while I was gone?
I think Justin did 2, and I did 1. Though mine was kind of 2 in a way.
Which just a real quick review, Greg. What were your 2? Well,
I actually put Carson Palmer and Eli Manning above Russell Wilson by the end of the year.
Well, we're okay. Just so you guys know, we're working on a little Skull King football bet for this one, because Greg, obviously, if you've listened to our podcast at all, you know that he, especially this season, Greg is not high on Russell Wilson. And honestly, I almost feel like he doesn't take into account the fact that Russell Wilson's stats were down last year because he was hurt. He had he got his knee rolled over in week 1 and his ankle rolled over in week 2 and still played through them all. So that obviously killed his mobility. This year, he's fully healthy. He's taken a couple pounds off so that he should be a little quicker. So that's just so we've got a little. He thinks that Carson Palmer will finish, like he said, will finish above Russell Wilson, and that the Arizona Cardinals will win the NFC West.
That is affirmative. I believe in both of those things, as I believe the earth is round. However, some believe it is flat, and that is okay. I am not here to judge. I am just saying I see things a certain way.
You see things a little differently? That's okay.
Right. We'll see where it goes. I think it's going to be a good competition either way. I don't think, in any sense, either one of those ends of the bet, right or wrong, end up, like a landslide one over the other. I don't see Carson slinging 35 TDs and Russell 24, type of thing. But yeah, I do see Arizona as being, I think, in a slightly better position, this year to contend. And again, I see it as probably a 1-game differential between the two. But I think as far as the NFC breaks down, there's so much in the South and there's so much in the East as far as potential to produce two teams that make the playoffs. I think the odd man out is the NFC West, and then ultimately what you see in the NFC North, where you have a Minnesota or a Detroit that's going to linger around, like that, the redheaded stepchild, just trying to break into the playoffs there, in the last second, but ultimately they'll be unseated by better teams in other divisions.
All right. I guess I could give my second one. Cooper Kupp will finish as a wide receiver 2. If you look at how much he has been targeted by Jared Goff over this entire preseason, Cooper has shown to be a very adequate route runner, with the ability to, while he, I think his 40 time or his lack of 40 time was very overrated in the combine. I think he ran like a 4.64, somewhere in there. He's never actually really been known as a speedster. He is a guy who can get separation and use his body to separate from the defense to be able to catch the ball. He has a decent sized frame. I think that he, again, we're talking about a Rams team that's crappy, and so they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. And I think that Cooper Kupp will be a large benefactor of that. And I can see him finishing as wide receiver 2 for the season. No comments?
I do not rule it out completely, but I do think that's a bold prediction.
That's the point of this show.
I think that, and you're a mirror. I think where Justin and I are coming in on this is we're probably not bold enough.
Wait for my next one.
I'm thinking
wait for his next one.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to come up with like Nick Folk's gonna have 3 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, the kicker.
Yeah, there's my prediction. Take that one, Ryan.
All right. Justin, what do we got for your ultimate prediction?
My ultimate prediction, and I like to, but I'll go with this one. Bilal Powell finishes as a low RB1, high RB2. And here's why. Greg is muted and doesn't believe, and he's laughing. But
he's laughing so hard he's turning purple.
Let me bring you some stats. Last year, he was the backup to Matt Forte, ran 131 times, and had a rushing average of 5.5. If you get him to 250 carries with the same average, that puts him at 1,400 rushing yards. He will be the primary back. The Jets have no one to throw to. He had 58 receptions for 388 additional yards. He only had 5 TVs, which also brought his value down. If he cuts into and has a similar year on the touchdown side, what Matt Forte has, that puts him right there at a RB1, RB2 threshold. Now, because the Jets don't have any receivers, they're going to stack the box, which may give him the only challenge that he has in trying to break through. But obviously the Jets have nothing in terms of passing. They have no wide receivers. They're going to run routes, and Bilal Powell is going to catch the ball. Bilal Powell is the offense. As sad as that sounds, I'm not saying they're going to win a lot of games, but Bilal Powell really is the only one here who's going to bring you any fantasy value and is going to be so heavily relied upon to do anything for the offense. He's going to be so targeted. So that's bold, and maybe now the boldest one as Greg is now off of mute and has stopped laughing. But still, I see that very bold, but I really like Bilal Powell this year.
Okay, real quick. I don't know how bold that actually is. Do you know where Bilal Powell finished in PPR last year?
RB2.
He was the running back overall in PPR. He was the running back 15. In some of them 16. So he finished as a high-end running back 2 already. Now, could he get up? He could, if he gets more carries, yeah, he could possibly get up to that running back 1. But he's already finished as a mid to high running back 2.
Matt Forte is basically there to hold up space.
Pretty much.
The Giants were looking to get rid of him. They owe him $4 million. They were trying to offload someone to take that. And obviously, they couldn't find
the Browns couldn't afford that one.
They're the Jets. Osweiler was already taken by Denver and the Browns, so no one else could afford any other mistakes. So Matt Forte is there, but he's not really there.
So I would agree with you that Matt Forte is not really there, and I agree with you that the only thing that's reasonably attractive on the Jets from a fantasy football perspective is Bilal Powell. However, I would pose this question. Are the Jets more talented or less talented this year than they were last year? And I would argue less. So that's going to make Bilal Powell's job that much tougher. And I don't see that, I can see the more carries, I can see the more targets and all this other things, but when you subtract that talent around him, it's like the Leonard Fournette argument again. If I go and I look at Jacksonville's roster, yeah, Blake Bortles is a disappointment. And maybe, Chad Henne is nobody's belle of the ball. But those two guys might get a bust erected of them in New York compared to what they're ruling out there at quarterback, and let alone what the talent you have at wide receiver, better overall environment. So, that's where I would say that I would take Fournette in that situation. If I'm looking at, you're looking – there's a whole line of ugly chicks, right? And that there's 2 of them in there that you would possibly ever want to be seen with in public. So I'm with you. It's probably Fournette and Powell. I just think that Fournette's got in better lighting is going to be more desirable than Bilal Powell. So, and I think you did get me with that, Ryan. He finished in the top 15. Getting back to the amount of rookies, though, that are coming in this year, how many of them are going to occupy the top 20 theoretically? If we look at entering the year, how many of them could? I think you expect that Hunt would be a top 20 running back. You look at McCaffrey, you would expect he's going to be a top 20 running back. I think Fournette's a top 20 running back. So you have, I think Joe Mixon can end up pushing for that depending on how the carries break down. So you theoretically have 4 to maybe 5 guys new to the league this year that are going to be crowding, that space that I think are arguably in better situations as well. So not trying to crush too hard on you, Justin. It's just anything positive off of the Jets makes me chuckle.
Well, we can understand that a little bit. So, Greg, did you have any more?
As far as bold predictions, you know what? I'm gonna go real bold here, and I would say that Tarik Cohen from the Bears will finish as a top 30 running back by the end of the season.
I can see that.
I think if that guy gets 10 touches a game, 10 to 12 touches a game, that's going to be enough opportunity for him to produce some decent numbers, by the time the year is over. So even have maybe some decent touchdown numbers, albeit all of them on the long side. But I think he's one of those dark horse candidates too that's going to get a lot of attention as the year goes on. And in the event that somebody like Jordan Howard goes down, Jeremy Langford's gone. Kadeem Carey sucks. I mean, he went to the U of A. I mean, he's not. Come on. So
and has a wrist injury.
Right. And yeah, he's banged up. So, then, I mean, all of a sudden, Cohen's could be in a position to really shine, for that offense, I think, as the season goes on. And he's not going to get any attention on fantasy rosters for a good chunk of the season, I would assume.
He's let me see. I know that right now he's one of many that are very much on the low end, just because they weren't drafted high, so people aren't paying attention to their name. So I think really the only reason that Chris Carson is getting as much airtime as he is right now for the Seahawks is because he pretty much just plain outperformed everyone else in the Seahawks backfield during the preseason. So, all right. I'm going to go – I think this is my last one. I only had 3 really, because I tried to put, like I told these guys earlier, I tried to put one down. I just couldn't do it because I kept laughing so hard that I just know it's not going to happen. So, anyways, I have Terrell Pryor finishing. You know, I'm going to be really bold. Terrell Pryor will finish as a top 5 wide receiver this year.
Oof. I had top 10.
Yeah, I don't think 10's bold enough.
So who's your 5 then? If Terrell Pryor is going to be in the top 5, and let's just say he's 5, who are your other 4?
AB, Julio.
Okay.
Antonio
Evans.
Brown.
Yeah, Antonio Brown, Julio. And I could even see Julio dropping down a little bit, to be completely honest, with his injury history. AJ Green. And Jordy Nelson.
I was about to say you got to go Jordy.
I think that Jordy Nelson could see a drop off this year. Just age wise, could see a drop off this year.
Well, there's also a whole lot more weapons there.
Yeah, they do have more weapons to use in Green Bay. You've got let's see what else. Mike Evans. I'm just not. There's more weapons to use in Tampa Bay as well. I think that if they were smart, they'd focus more on the running game. I mean, to be completely honest.
Well, and the second half of the year, Evans fell off the map because he started off hot, and then second half of the year, he was not a top 1.
Yeah, I mean, AJ Green is the only real pass catching weapon in Cincinnati. Therefore, as long as he stays healthy, he'll finish up there. Again, I'm trying to make a bold prediction, and I think that Terrell Pryor will finish in the top 10. I want to be bold and think that he can finish in the top 5. So,
certainly possible. Playing with Cousins and the numbers he put up last year, I mean, I think he's in a much better situation. I think he's an upgrade to what Cousins had before. So, I mean, I'm really high on Pryor going into this year. I mean, I would basically take him every chance I get.
I did.
In the draft, I got him, in a draft last week. So I was really, really happy with that.
Yeah. The one thing, here's one stat that I saw in one of the discussion groups that I'm in, that since Jay Gruden became the coach of the Redskins, the only teams to throw for more yards than the Washington Redskins are the Patriots, the Saints, the Falcons, and the Packers. Those are the only 4 teams that have thrown for more yards than the Washington Redskins since Jay Gruden became the coach 3 years ago.
And all of those years, the quarterback was a quarterback 1 or 2.
Yeah. So
I'm going to jump in with a super bold prediction that's a little bit longer term that's going to encompass the offseason.
Okay.
I believe Russell Wilson will be traded.
What?
That is going to be my prediction.
You're out of your mind.
And let me tell you why. If we look at where contracts are going, look at what Matthew Stafford just got.
Yep.
Now, who in their right mind, if you had a choice between those 2 guys sitting in front of you right now, exact same contracts, who would you rather have? Is there anybody who says Matthew Stafford? No. No, there's not a single person who does. What's going to happen with the contracts as we push forward here? They're just going to keep going higher. When you look at Russell's contract, it's downright desirable. It's got a little bit of time left on it. There's a lot of quarterbacks coming up in this draft. So what I think is that guy's got a heck of a lot of value potentially, in a rebuilding effort. You could get quite the haul in draft picks, pull off a Dallas Cowboys-like Herschel Walker deal, get yourself 4 first-rounders or something insane from a team like the Jets or whomever. That's where I see Russell Wilson's future being, because to your point, in the offensive line, the other things they want on that team, you're not going to get that with $100 million players. You'd be better off starting with a younger, talented guy or whatever, and just have a serviceable dude. But I'm telling you, I think that guy is actually potential trade bait if they struggle again this year. Because let's say they don't make the playoffs.
Because they struggled last year going 10-5-1.
Right. But what did they get out of it?
Russell Wilson's won 10 games every year since entering the league.
That's why he's so desirable to trade.
That's why they're not going to trade him.
Seattle will not trade away to get away from fantasy. Seattle will not trade away the quarterback that brought them the Super Bowl. It won't happen. It's like the coach that brings the Seattle Mariners to the World Series and wins will be allowed to stay in Seattle until they die, essentially. That's how, quote-unquote, loyal to a fault and how desperate, let's just be honest, Seattle sports fans are for their, I don't want to say relevancy, but for the droughts. I mean, for the longest time, Seattle hadn't won a Super Bowl since the 70s when they got started. The Mariners still are the only baseball team in Major League that has never been to a World Series.
Forget winning one. They haven't even
Forget winning one. They haven't even been to one. So I think that's a little crazy. I think you're trying to outbold the bold prediction with some craziness. But let me get to my next one. And this one is back to the reality on the realm of possibilities. I believe this year that Randall Cobb finishes ahead of Davante Adams in fantasy production. And here's why. Currently, right now, Davante Adams, if you were to draft today, is going as 4-9 in a PPR draft, round 4, pick 9. Randall Cobb is going in round 8, pick 6. 2 years ago, Jordy Nelson was out for injury. Davante Adams couldn't do squat, and Randall Cobb was essentially double-teamed, and this was the year of the relax from Aaron Rodgers. So that's why the production went down from Randall Cobb. There was no other real consistent receiver to go to, so teams could double and tee off on Randall Cobb. Last year, Nelson is back. Davante Adams now is the resurgence because Randall Cobb is injured almost the entire season, battling issues off the field, and was never 100% healthy. Davante Adams had one outlier year. It is not the norm. It is the outlier. I believe this year, even on the depth chart, Randall Cobb is the number 2 receiver. He's going to come back. If he's fully healthy, he will come back, and you will see more of a Davante Adams come down and Randall Cobb come up, and I think they slightly shift. I'm not saying Randall Cobb drastically outperforms, but I believe that Randall Cobb is better than Davante Adams this year in terms of production, and you're able to get him in round 8 as opposed to round 4.
I agree with you there. I think that Adams is going through right now, went through this draft season, through the same thing that Cam Newton did in 2016.
Blew the doors off, and then everyone loves him.
Everyone expected him. Oh, he is now the guy. No. 2015 was an outlier for Cam Newton. He's not going to do that this year. He didn't do it last year. 2015 was the outlier. For Davante Adams, it was, his 3rd year in the league. I still see it as a bit of an outlier. He is not going to produce 12 TDs this year. There's a lot more production that's going to go to Randall Cobb as long as Cobb stays healthy. And yes, I agree with you. I think that Cobb will finish better than Davante Adams.
Yeah, because 3 years ago, Randall Cobb was a top 8 receiver in PPR. Do you guys have another one, or do I go again?
I'm done with them. So looks like you over prepared for tonight.
I have 2 more. Another crazy one is I believe OBJ, Odell Beckham Jr., finishes outside the wide receiver 1 position. And here's why. Woo. Yes, I believe that Eli Manning has a great year. Odell Beckham Jr. is entering his 3rd season.
Yep.
Now, 3rd or 4th season? 4th season. So, can you name me another offensive weapon at wide receiver that's been on the roster when he was there? It's only been 4 years. You can't really name another offensive wide receiver weapon. Sterling Shepard was great, got 8 touchdowns last year. Great, cool. But now you're bringing in Brandon Marshall, who is not necessarily quite still in the RB1 category, but a huge talent that will eat into his targets. It will also, yes, people say, too many people believe that people won't double team OBJ anymore. Well, that's not only the case, but now there's another target on the other side of the field to throw to. Add in Sterling Shepard, add in Evan Ingram again, and you now have 4 legitimate wide receiver targets for Eli Manning to throw to. He's not going to have just the one to OBJ. And there were 2 games last year where Odell Beckham Jr. disappeared completely. Odell Beckham Jr. at times can lose his head, especially if he plays Washington against or against Norman. That's going to be like primetime TV. Watching Saturday Night Live skits all over again, just watching those two act like children. But I think there's a lot of talent there, and already with injury issues, I think Odell Beckham is worried more about his long-term career and doesn't want to necessarily get injured and may play a little bit safer as opposed to get injured. There's already been talk about him getting the insurance policy to that would guarantee his ability to make the money that he would make on a contract at the end of the year. And so I think there's some things working against him. Bold.
That's very bold.
I'm just not – I passed Odell Beckham Jr. in a draft at the 6th position. He fell to 6, and I still picked Jordy Nelson above Odell Beckham Jr.
Well, I think Nelson's a lower risk pick there. I mean, I could see doing that myself. I do think that there's risk with OBJ. Like you said, he loses his head. He is starting the season off with an ankle injury. He is worried about making sure he gets the big payday. And you do have the additional talent that's been developed over the course of the last 2 seasons around him. So, I could see a drop off there. I mean, I don't know if he can fall out of the top 10 or the top 12, but I could see him being at the bottom of it, not at the top of it.
Yeah, it's bold.
It's bold.
It's bold.
No one else has had a bold anti Odell Beckham Jr. prediction that I've heard from all the other avenues.
Yeah, everyone else is he'll be back to being the number 1. So, no, I like it. All right, Justin, what's your last one? We'll go ahead and close out the show.
My last one is that Phillip Rivers finishes as a top 6 fantasy quarterback this year.
Problem is he'll do that for the first half of the season and then fall off the second half like he does every season.
Okay, fine. But let me finish my statement. This is my bold prediction. Last year, he had to build chemistry with brand new guys in Kelvin Benjamin and Tyrell Williams. He now has Allen back. Hunter Henry also was a rookie last year. I don't necessarily think Hunter Henry is going to get the same touchdown volume, but I think he gets more passes. Already with us not believing in Melvin Gordon's value as a number 1 running back in fantasy, I think that leads to more passing. Also, the Chargers' defense is not good at all. They're going to need to throw the ball throughout the game. They're not going to get into a ball control, we're ahead by a lot of touchdowns kinds of games this season. So they're going to need to throw the ball. I see Phillip Rivers not necessarily getting the 5,000-yard mark, but I think high 4,000 yards. He still will throw his interceptions. I think he gets 30-plus TDs, teens to high teens on interceptions, so that might bite you a little bit. But I'm a big believer in Phillip Rivers as a quarterback value this year, still sitting on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues.
I would agree from a production standpoint. I mean, he always ends up there towards by the end of the year. His numbers are solid relative to the fact that he's generally not drafted or drafted incredibly low, but generally not drafted. So I think from a value perspective, he's about the safest value play that's out there, and he could certainly finish as a top 10 quarterback. So again, it's the turnovers, it's the rub that you take with a handful of those guys, with Eli, with Breeze, with and with Rivers. They throw the ball a ton, a lot of yards, a lot of turnovers.
Yeah, again, my thing with Rivers is he's had so many seasons where he's been in the top 5 or even the top fantasy quarterback halfway through the year and then just falling off the second half of the season. So It's bold. I like it.
Well, I think it's the first season where he's not expecting 1 to 3 children too, so that might help production.
Yeah, I saw one comment about that they're 9 children. I think it's 9 that they have now.
They have 9. They have 9.
They have nine children, and what was it?
God bless that woman.
What I think one person's comment was, "Yeah, the kids are just kind of walking out of her now at this point."
Right. Exactly.
He's trying to create a new football team, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's it for tonight. We want to thank you, everyone, for listening in, whether you listened in on the live streams on Facebook or Twitter or on Instagram. We really appreciate you guys taking a little bit of your night to hear what we have to say. We want to thank everyone who's listening to us, whether it be on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn, YouTube, wherever you're watching us or listening to us. We really appreciate you guys taking the time. And let's play a little football. It's good to hear that. It's nice to know that football is starting up. If you're listening to this on iTunes, starting up tonight, Thursday night with the Patriots and the Chiefs. Make sure that you guys make the proper adjustments for your teams. If you have anyone from Miami or Tampa Bay, if you have Jameis Winston, make sure to pick up Jay Cutler. Sorry. Make sure that you make the proper adjustments for if you have Jameis Winston or Mike Evans or Jay Ajayi, those guys from Miami and Tampa Bay, since their bye week has now become week 1 with Hurricane Irma. And for all of those who are in, especially in the Florida area this weekend, we've got one of our writers, Dante, who's down there, that wanted to join the show tonight, but he's in the middle of hurricane prep. So our thoughts and prayers, we're hoping for the storm to settle down a bit before it hits Florida. So again, thank you all for listening. Again, this is the Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast, and we'll talk to you guys all later. Hey, Skull King Nation, thank you for listening to the Skull King Football Podcast. Did you like this episode? If so, be sure to go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube to subscribe. Also, please leave us a rating and reviews to let us know how we can better help you rule your leagues.